What if I told you that the very first $100,000 you save and invest might feel like climbing Mount Everest, but every dollar after that feels more like rolling downhill with a snowball that just keeps getting bigger and faster? Sounds strange, right? But here's the thing. Investors from Warren Buffett's partner Charlie Munger to countless self-made millionaires agree. The hardest money you'll ever make is that first 100 grand. After that, something shifts. Your money finally starts doing the heavy lifting for you. So why does it take so long to hit that first milestone? And why does it suddenly speed up afterward? Let's break it down step by step. Think about it like this. If you put $5,000 into an investment that grows at 10% in a year, you'll make $500. That's not bad, but it's also not going to change your life. $500 might pay for groceries or a utility bill, but it doesn't feel like much when you think of building wealth. But once that account grows to $100,000, a 10% return gives you $10,000 in a year. That's the price of a new car, or a year's worth of rent in many places. And if you manage to get to $1 million, 10% equals $100,000. That's an entire salary, just sitting there, compounding. Now, here's why that first 100 feels like you're pulling teeth. Almost all of it has to come from your own pocket. In other words, in the early days, you're carrying the weight yourself. Saving feels like squeezing water from a stone. You're working extra hours, cutting down expenses, saying no to that new iPhone, while your investments are only giving you crumbs in return. It's not because compounding doesn't work, it's because the snowball is still tiny. According to data from the Federal Reserve, the median savings for American households under 35 is less than $5,000. That means most young people are still in the tiny snowball phase, where compound interest looks like loose change. But if you can push past this phase and keep feeding that snowball, that's when things start to get exciting. Here's the tricky part. Most people never even start. They keep telling themselves, "I'll invest when I have more money." But that logic is upside down. It's like saying, "I'll start going to the gym once I'm already fit." Investing is what gets you more money, just like the gym is what makes you stronger. And let's be honest, there's also fear. We all know someone who says, investing is too risky. What if I lose it all? Sure, there's risk, but here's a reality check. Leaving all your money in a savings account where inflation eats away at it year after year is also risky. The Bureau of Labor Statistics shows that the average inflation rate in the US over the past 50 years has been around 3 to 4%. That means your $100 today will only buy about $60 worth of stuff in 20 years. Playing it too safe can actually guarantee that you fall behind. So yes, the first $100,000 is grueling, but it's also a training ground. It teaches you the habits that wealthy people live by every day. Living below your means, consistently saving, and letting money work for you. It's like lifting weights. At first, the bar feels impossibly heavy, but once you build muscle, the same weight feels light, and soon you're adding plates without even thinking about it. The biggest mindset shift happens once you start to see those dollar returns grow. When your portfolio finally hits the six-figure mark, suddenly compound interest becomes real. You'll actually notice the growth month by month. That's when you start saying, wow, if this much money came in without me lifting a finger, maybe I should double down. You stop seeing saving as a sacrifice and start seeing it as a game where the more chips you put in, the faster the jackpot grows. And here's the fun part. Hitting that first $100,000 changes the way you spend. Suddenly, that $100 dinner out doesn't look so tempting when you realize that same $100 could be making you $10 a year, every year, for the rest of your life if you invested it. That's the power of opportunity cost. Once you see money as a little worker that could either be out there earning more for you or sitting wasted on a plate of pasta, it gets harder to casually blow cash on things that don't matter. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying you should live like a monk, but when you're chasing your first 100 grand, every dollar is a soldier. Every dollar you waste is like sending a soldier off to retire early instead of fighting in your army. Build your army strong enough, and one day, it fights for you while you sleep. So let's wrap up part 1 with this. If you're frustrated because your wealth feels like it's crawling instead of running, remember, it's supposed to feel that way in the beginning. You're in the manual labor stage, where your own savings are doing most of the work. The key is to keep pushing through, because once you hit that six-figure mark, compounding starts to feel like magic. And trust me, that magic only grows stronger. In part 2, we'll dig into why compounding starts snowballing so dramatically after $100,000, and how to structure your life so you reach that milestone years sooner. Perfect! Let's roll right into part 2. Have you ever noticed how slow money feels when you're starting out, but how fast it seems to multiply once you hit a certain point? That's not your imagination. It's the math of compounding finally flexing its muscles. Here's the thing. When you're grinding toward your first $100,000, about 80–90% of that money usually comes from you, your sweat, your hours, your sacrifices. But once you cross that line, the ratio flips. Your investments begin contributing more than you do. It's like pushing a car uphill, exhausting at first, but once you reach the peak, gravity takes over and the car starts rolling on its own. Let's put some real numbers on this. Suppose you've got $100,000 invested, growing at an average annual return of 10%, which is close to the long-term historical return of the S&P 500, according to data from Standard & Poor's. That's $10,000 in 1 year, without you doing anything. If you keep adding, say, $10,000 of your own savings that year, your contribution and the growth are now equal. From here on out, every year the balance tips more in favor of the investments themselves. It's like hiring a team of invisible workers who never sleep, never eat, and keep bringing in more cash. Now, compare that with the beginning. A $5,000 portfolio earning 10% gives you $500. That's not even a week's rent in many cities. The reason so many people give up early is because it feels like the needle barely moves. But wealth building is a long game, and the scoreboard only starts to look impressive once the numbers get bigger. Here's where it gets interesting. By the time you've got $300,000 invested, a 10% return is $30,000. That's more than the median personal income in many parts of the world. And at $1 million, you're looking at $100,000 per year in growth alone. At that point, your portfolio is literally paying you more than most jobs ever could. And all of this happens without you clocking extra hours, fighting traffic, or answering emails. It's your money working harder than you ever could. But why does this process feel so disproportionately slow at the start? Two big reasons: discipline and time. First, discipline. Building to $100,000 requires you to rewire how you think about money. Most people fall into the trap of lifestyle inflation. Every time they get a raise, they upgrade their life. New car, bigger apartment, fancier vacations. That cycle keeps them broke, no matter how much they earn. The people who actually reach six figures in savings are usually the ones who treat raises and side hustles as opportunities to save more, not spend more. It's not glamorous, but it's effective. Second, time. Compounding doesn't care about how smart you are or how hard you work. It only cares about how long you leave money alone. Albert Einstein famously called compound interest the eighth wonder of the world. But here's the catch. Compounding only looks magical when given enough years to grow. 10 years at 10% turns $10,000 into about $26,000. But 30 years, that same $10,000 becomes nearly $175,000. The real magic is in the decades. And let's be real, time is also the one thing most of us don't want to wait for. That's why hitting $100,000 early in life is such a game changer. If you can cross that line in your 20s or 30s, the growth over the next 30–40 years will be jaw-dropping. Here's an example straight from Vanguard's retirement calculators. If you invest $500 a month at a 7% return starting at age 25, by age 65, you'll have over $1.2 million. If you wait just 10 years to start, you'll end up with only about $550,000 by 65, even though you contributed nearly the same total amount. That's the cost of waiting. So how do you speed this up? Increasing your income is the obvious answer. A side hustle, freelancing, or even picking up overtime can give you the extra fuel you need. But just as important is cutting back on the silent killers, like expensive car payments, unused subscriptions, or impulsive spending that bleeds hundreds every month. Think of it this way. Every unnecessary expense is like poking holes in the bucket you're trying to fill. The key mindset shift? Stop thinking of your savings as deprivation. Think of them as freedom tokens. Every dollar invested is a tiny seed that grows into a tree shading your future. You're not just saying no to spending, you're saying yes to options later in life. By now, you can probably see why Charlie Munger was right. That first $100,000 feels like walking through mud. But once you reach it, the mud turns into a downhill slope, and suddenly you're moving faster than you thought possible. Let's wrap this part up with a simple takeaway. Wealth building has a tipping point. Before $100,000, your money feels weak and lazy. It barely shows up to work. After $100,000, it becomes a powerhouse, compounding at a rate that makes your own contributions feel secondary. That's why the first milestone matters so much. It's the bridge between frustration and momentum. In part 3, we'll look at how reaching $100,000 opens up a world of opportunities, career moves, business risks, and investment chances you can't take when you're living paycheck to paycheck. Plus, we'll talk about how to keep the momentum going once you're past the first big hurdle. Great! Let's dive into the final part. So, what changes once you've crossed that $100,000 line? More than you think. It's not just about the numbers in your account. It's about the doors that money quietly opens for you. Here's the truth. When you're living paycheck to paycheck, every decision feels boxed in. You're one emergency away from debt. You can't take big risks because one wrong move could sink you. But once you've built a six-figure cushion, the entire game changes. Suddenly, you have options. Let's say your job pays $50,000 a year, but you get an opportunity at a commission-only role where the earning potential is $100,000 or more. Without savings, that risk looks terrifying. You can't afford months without steady income. But with $100,000 in the bank or invested, that safety net gives you the courage to take the shot. And sometimes, that leap can double or triple your long-term income. The same applies to business opportunities. Ever dreamed of starting something of your own? Without capital, it stays a dream. But with savings, you can actually test the waters. Sure, there's still risk, but it's the kind of risk you can recover from. And history shows that calculated risks often pay off big. According to the Kauffman Foundation, nearly 40% of entrepreneurs used personal savings as their primary source of startup capital. In other words, the freedom fund you've built is often the seed of bigger things. And let's not forget real estate. Maybe you come across a home being sold below market value, or a rental property in an up-and-coming neighborhood. With no money saved, that opportunity passes you by. With $100,000, suddenly you can grab deals that others only dream about. Even if you don't cash out investments often, the simple fact that you could gives you flexibility most people lack. Here's another shift. When you've got money, you can afford to invest more aggressively. If a speculative stock or a friend's startup catches your attention, you can put a little money into it without worrying it'll ruin you if it goes south. That's a privilege people with $500 in savings don't have. Having wealth gives you room to play offense instead of always playing defense. Now, let's be clear. Reaching $100,000 isn't the finish line. It's the launch pad. Charlie Munger himself said, the first million is the real milestone. But compared to that first 100, getting to $1 million feels more natural because your investments start carrying more of the load. By the time you hit $200,000 or $300,000, compound growth starts to feel like a snowball racing downhill, faster and faster each year. So, how do you keep the momentum going once you've crossed that first big hurdle? For starters, don't relax too much. It's tempting to splurge once you've saved six figures, but remember, the second 100 comes faster, and if you stay disciplined, you can ride that wave straight into millionaire territory. Focus on three things. Keep feeding your investments, keep your lifestyle lean enough that you're saving a good chunk of income, and keep learning. The more you understand about markets, business, and opportunities, the better you'll be at spotting chances that accelerate your growth. And here's a little mental trick that helps. Don't just see your money as numbers on a screen. See it as freedom. Every dollar you save is a choice you're buying back, a choice to quit a job you hate, a choice to live in a better neighborhood, a choice to take 6 months off and travel. Wealth isn't just about luxury. It's about breathing room. It's about not being trapped. So let's bring it all together. The first $100,000 is tough because you're doing most of the work. After that, your money starts doing the heavy lifting, and suddenly progress accelerates. Along the way, you'll notice your mindset changing, spending habits shift, opportunities expand, and risk feels less scary. That's why Charlie Munger was right. Once you hit the first 100 grand, the path to wealth feels smoother, faster, and more exciting. The takeaway? Don't get discouraged if you feel stuck in the early stages. It's supposed to feel slow at first, but every dollar you save is a soldier joining your army, and once your army is big enough, it fights for you. The climb is hardest at the beginning, but the view on the other side is worth every step. So keep pushing, keep saving, and keep investing. Because once that snowball starts rolling, it doesn't stop.